Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I almost had a catastrophic user error. I was waiting for it to start. It's almost noon. It's almost noon. I'm going to hit start the live. And so my mouse just kept hovering above end meeting. I'm like, no, what are you doing? Can't end it before I bring the magic. Okay, we're going to get started in just 1 second. I'm happy you're here. I appreciate it. I especially appreciate it when you come early and on time. When you do, it's a simple thank you to me and my team. I show up on time, so I appreciate that. But also LinkedIn then pushes the notice out to more people saying, hey, Neil's starting with the training. We're over there. We're doing some networking. Come join the community. So thank you for that. And I like to start off with a tip as a way to say thank you. And my tip for today is to go back a little bit into my 7-step process for federal revenue success. And the 7-step process, I'll talk about it in a minute, but it aligns for me. My tip today aligns with this line that I like that some of us say is people don't care what you know until they know that you care. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And one of the easiest ways you can show that you care, and let me see if I can show a really quick picture about this. One of the quickest, easiest ways you can show that you care is by doing research. This is my 7-step process. If you haven't seen it before, I teach that the 7-step process to success begins with research, and then you go into identifying the people you want to call, you call them, you build relationships in order to hear about opportunities, write winning proposals, and start winning contracts, right? But it all begins with research. And this is a very simple way to show agency buyers that you care. When you go in to meet with a small business specialist, or you go in to meet with program office personnel, et cetera, having an understanding of what their organizational structure is like, having an understanding of what their mission is. Why do they even exist? It seems like a simple thing, but those kind of things show the people you're meeting, generally buyers, right? They show that you care. We just had somebody put in the chat, I don't know if they did it yesterday in our live or the day before, but they put in the chat about how, because I teach all the time, make sure you have a good understanding of the customer, make sure you do a little bit of research before you go into a meeting. By the way, don't do research before you call, because you want to call and schedule a meeting, then invest more time to prepare for that meeting. But when you prepare, you're doing research on that agency. And this person, Christine, she was mentioning yesterday or the day before that she had done the research, and it was such, for me even, it was such an odd thing that she kind of got grilled a little bit when she came in, where the customer was asking, at HHS, do you know the agencies we have? Do you understand this? Or the Navy, I see David Waltz is on today. Do you understand how the Navy's structured? We have NAVC and NAVFAC and NAVWAR. Do you understand that they're different buying commands and they buy different things and they have different missions? When you do that little bit of research before you go meet with people, you're going to be able to demonstrate that you care, right? And then they'll start caring about what you know. The other thing is, going with today's training, when you do that research, it will really inform what you do and the actions you take to try to drive towards your goals. And so I'm going to try to show you some of that research activity today as it relates to going into the Army. You can pick this right out of the Army and go into Department of Education or Department of Navy, Department of Justice. It doesn't matter, because what I'm teaching you are skills and process that you can then repeat on any particular customer within federal agencies. But we're going to dive into that. But that was I guess it was a little longer than a quick little tip of for those of you showing up early and on time. Again, I really appreciate that you do. Okay, so let me get started with today's training. If you come to my training often enough, you know that I tend to use slides. I'm not using slides today. I'm going to go straight into the websites that I want to show you. And I'm going to show you how to get in and understanding, in this particular case, Army, and how to drive forward. In fact, somebody, I had a couple of people asking me, really, even more specifically, can you talk about like how to push into the Army, into a particular base? And again, whatever I show will be useful to the Navy or DHS or whatever. But as I go into the training, I really want to show you how I do it. And I want to show you the walls I run into that I hit and I back up and I go, oh, let's go this way. Because really, research or sales is just a maze. And if you can think about a maze is not this straight shot from the beginning to the end. A maze is like going to this wall and then going around. And the key thing about a maze to me is that you're really having to make just-in-time decisions. I'm going to go down this way. Oop, there's a T. Which way do I go, right or left? I'm going to go right. And you go right because the information you had was 50-50 chance that you're making a correct decision. And you go down that way a little bit and you realize, oh, it's not a right decision. That's totally fine. You just come back and you go along your way. You don't let that decision stop you. And research in sales is that same thing. Sometimes you'll be trying to talk to certain people or go a certain path. You realize that's not really working. Let me come back a different direction. So I like to do today's training in the same way I would do this literally when I'm offline. Instead of showing you a pretty packaged set of slides and go, this is exactly what to do, I want to show you how the heck did I even get there? What did I run into? And I want to show you that it is not always the easiest thing in the world, but if you're persistent, you will achieve your goals. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and before that, I was a small business owner for 20 years. Since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process, we're going to achieve predictable, repeatable results. A to Z leads to those repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. I want you to understand that if you develop a certain set of skills and put a process together with those skills, you will have repeatable, predictable outcomes every single time. Okay, and so, by the way, I don't have it up at the moment. I could actually share my screen in a second. I'll show you. But make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. It's the Government Contracting Success newsletter out there. It's the largest one on LinkedIn, and it grows constantly because people see it as a place to network and to learn about government contracting. I don't put anything in there that is not valuable to you and your goals for growth in the federal market. Okay, I think I got it all. Oh, last thing, thank you for registering for training. Got a lot of people who registered for training. I got a couple of more, well, I guess I got one more training this week on Friday, and then training's all lined up for next week. Make sure you go register for training. When you do, it's a simple thank you to my team and me, but also LinkedIn will push the word out to more people. And we grow our community, and our community is your network, your chance to find other people that you can meet with. All right, let me get rocking and rolling. And actually, as I go forward, I appreciate the people putting into the comments. I love this, right? I can see there's Gina doing cyber and Rob doing cyber. Are you guys with the same company? You should talk to each other. You're both doing cyber. I didn't look above to see if Luis is doing cyber. Nope, doing engineering and supply chain management, which is perfect. But thank you for engaging in chat. This is not just training, but it's networking, and you have a chance to do that networking. Okay, so let's get started diving into going into the Army. And I just wanted to begin with my first tip, because today is really about end of the year spending tips, but it's not all about directly contracts. There's tips that relate to it, activities you can be doing in the next 2.5 months here that will lead to your increase in success. And so the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is just getting registered where the Army buyers are looking. And so here's an example. If you don't know how the Army buys or is structured, everybody does it a little differently, right? And in the Army, they have this massive command called the Army Contracting Command. It basically is an entire command. Instead of going off and fighting wars, they make sure that the Army is buying what they need in order to go off and defend our country. And so you have an Army Contracting Command. You also have something called Mission Installation Contracting Command. And basically, these are entire huge organizations of contracting officers. Just think of it that way from a high level. Well, they have a tool, a supplier portal for the Army Contracting Command in Aberdeen Proving Ground. This vendor database is where they go look. When federal buyers go to look for small businesses like yours, they have a certain set way of doing it. They might look at they look at incumbents, they look at people who submitted RFP responses, who submitted RFI responses. Then they start moving out to supplier portals like this that are their own. And so in there, HHS has one, and other organizations do, but the Army has one. You want to make sure you're registered in there because they look in. And if you see some of the data I put in here, inside of this contracting command, right? Huge place, tons of money going out the door. And in there, you look at women-owned small businesses. There's 11,000 SBA, not self-certified, but SBA certified women-owned small businesses in DSBS. Only, at the time I wrote this article a couple of months back, only 300 of them were registered in the supplier portal for the Army. That's enough businesses for them to go, well, here's 20 of them. Let me move forward. Well, you want to be one of those folks. And so it's important for you to get in there and check. I provide, and maybe somebody will grab this link and throw it in. It's in my newsletter. But I provide step-by-step guides on how you can do it. And I made a couple of hiccups. And so I get rid of the hiccups and I just give you this streamlined approach to registering in here. And it's really pretty straightforward. But once you do, you're visible to the Army in one of the supplier portals they go after. This is a good time for me to tell you a tip I do. Anytime I'm talking to a government buyer, anybody who's in the acquisition or small business profession, I'm always asking them, if I haven't asked before, do you have a particular supplier portal internally that I should be registered in? We have a supplier directory out there, a supplier portal directory on the newsletter, and there's over 100 different supplier portals between large primes and the government. Even the Navy has one in NavAir. And so it's important to understand where these are and to be chasing them down. Before you go register in the Army Contracting Command's Aberdeen Proving Ground vendor database here, make sure that your own score is squared away. So if I come in, for example, this is GovCon in a box. It's a new tool that we built. All of the features that you can find right now, July 15th, those are all free and they always will be, the ones you can find. And these, one of my favorite is your ability to get your own visibility score. So you can come in, just quickly find your company and go at it. If I go in here and I just show you a bunch right off the gate, right? Here's 356,000 companies. All of you are in here. All of your companies are in here. And we gave a score to every single one about how visible are you to a buyer. Here's a great example. This first company, it's got no capability statement in the narrative. So a buyer can't tell what these people sell. They're just in there. The next one, if they're a paper company, I'm assuming they do all sorts of stuff with printing and a lot of that activity that still happens out there. But if the government buyer's looking, that score is 14. And part of it is because they're not in there. Come into GovCon in a box after this training, and just all you have to do is come up here and type your company name in. So let me just use Graham as an example, since they allowed me to use them as an example. Their score is 100, right? And so out of Florida, I come in, I can learn what they are. When I come in and look at their profile, I can see some of the people who are working, contract vehicles they have. I can see their capability statement, their website. If I'm a buyer and I want to do more research, I can see down below they have experience listed in DSBS, and I can pull their experience from USA Spending. So I can see all this information, and which is why they got a 100 score, right? And why I favorited them in there, allowing me to show it. But go check out yours. All right, and so do that, because that, by the way, our tool is not creating our own data. That is in SAM and DSBS. We're just pointing out to you what you need to do, right? Here's a company that has a 100 score, and here's a company that has 4. What we're trying to reach out, what we're trying to do is reach out to all 350,000 companies and say, come on, let's increase your score. Let's all be a lot more visible to the federal buyer. But you do this in DSBS and SAM. You do the updates here that I tell you about. I tell you all about what to do. And then when you come back to the Army Contracting Command, you know exactly what to put in here because you've already done it in DSBS. This is why it's very, very fast, because you just kind of cut and paste. All right, first main tip is make sure you're visible in the places the Army is looking when they're buying. The second thing, and I want to make this even, this will be a lot more in the weeds and on purpose, but I wanted to use this example. So let me set the scenario. This example of, I've got a customer, they're doing water management. That's going to be today's example. And they want to get into military bases to be able to talk to them about water. This is not about an opportunity yet. This is about just breaking in and trying to understand the customer and see how we can help, and then identifying many opportunities, not just one. If you have just one opportunity and you're trying to go into the Army, well, you just call the points of contact. That's pretty straightforward. So in SAM, you will see generally a primary contract and a secondary point of contact, and you can call them. But what about when you're trying to get into Fort Benning, Georgia, which is now called Fort Monroe, or Fort Moore, excuse me. What about when you're trying to get in there and you don't know anybody and you like, how do I get in there? I worked with large firms, Booz Allen in particular, and I watched them go into a new base just like this, like Benning, and they went, hey, we're not doing anything. They took a senior associate and said, we don't have any traction down there. Go down there and try to get in. And they struggled with it. Even though they got millions of dollars in a Booz Allen card, they're still trying to figure out, well, how do I get in and what do I do? That's what I want to cover down in the next 15 minutes, is give you a lot of tips around that. So I'm going to come back to this page because this one here is where I start. And I'm going to guide you through this path of how do I go from knowing nothing about Fort Benning, Georgia, And by the way, the reason I keep occasionally calling it Fort Benning instead of Fort Moore is because I went to Fort Benning when I joined the Army. I became an Army Ranger, Airborne Ranger, right? And that's where that training happens. And Benning is stuck in my head. I'm okay with changing it to Fort Moore. I just forget. But anyways, before I walk you through how I move from Google into the places I want to go, let me just show you a quick couple of tips that are simpler. Fort Benning, Georgia, even the SBA still calls it Fort Benning instead of Fort Moore. One of the first things you want to do if you're trying to get in a certain place is go find out if the SBA has a role called the Procurement Center Representative, PCR. PCRs are responsible for the entire federal agency, basically. And their job is to sit there and make sure things that could go small do go small. But imagine there's like millions of contracts going out. And so they're very, very busy out there. But they do this by communicating with contracting officers and small business professionals in agencies that they're responsible for, which I'll show you in a second. And so what I want you to do is to reach out and build a relationship with the one at Fort Benning. Let's say you're the person trying to get to Fort Benning, Fort Moore. You're the person trying to get there. Get out, build a relationship. Take 2-3 months to build up that relationship. Find out where they go speak. Do they do vendor outreach sessions? Do they attend conferences? You can build relationships with them. The reason they're good is they know the very people inside of Fort Moore, Fort Benning, that you want to talk to. They know contract officers. They know small business professionals. They have a list that they probably will hand you if you get them on a good day. And so if I come here to the SBA site, and by the way I found this, I mean, I know about it over and over again, but you can just go to Google and type in SBA space PCR, and the first link will be this link. And so if I come here and I just type in, well, I've already done the search, right? You see my secret, I did that search. But if I type it in, right, you can see the search, it comes right up and it shows me that the activities covered by this PCR are perfect. It's who I'm looking for. The Army, they're dealing with different ones, but most importantly, they're the person covering Fort Benning, Fort Gordon. You can see, well, I was about to see, you can see they're in the South, but look how busy this person is. They also got Fort Irwin out in California, right? They're dealing with Tennessee. These PCRs have a lot of responsibility, but if you catch them and you look for mostly just introductions and information, they'll be able to help you. And so here I can see that it's Pamela Mitchell. She's the PCR for this particular area. I would be able to use, since she's down there in Georgia, I can use her as a potential gateway into Fort Moore, Fort Benning, and learn more about the organization and to begin to ask questions. Most importantly, if I'm talking to an SBA PCR, my next step is I want to be able to get introduced to small business professionals. If I really don't know anything about Fort Benning and Fort Moore here, then small business professionals are one of the best places to start, right? You get in, you get traction in there. You let them know what you're doing. You let them know that you're registered where you need to be, and you start taking their advice on moving forward, and you start asking their questions, and hopefully they'll answer. So let me just remind you, when you're going into whatever agency, Navy, Department of Education, or in this case, the Army down in Georgia, find your procurement center representative. When I teach people about sales pipelines and you're filling in an opportunity in your sales pipeline, you're moving it forward, one of the main steps I look for a salesperson to do is put the name of the PCR and the name of the small business professional that are related to this opportunity into the pipeline. That way, if you need help, you already got their information there. Okay, let me show you one other way that I would do this, and this is FPDS. And I've already walked through this, so I'm going to walk you through the same way I kind of did it. But if you go into the Federal Procurement Data System, this is where, for the most part, all contract awards are listed. This is the system of record for anything the government has spent money on. There's other tools that are out there, but this is the system of record for contract awards, for the most part, for every agency, certainly for the Army. So I just come over here to fpds.gov. And when I'm in there, I don't know if you can see it, I'm not zooming, but it says Fort Benning. So I'm just going to hit it and search. And what I'm really looking for is Fort Moore it's now called Fort Moore, right? But what I'm really looking for is to find out which kind of contracts are out there in the space that I'm looking for. So now I'm going to come over here. I typed Fort Benning. And when you see the results come back, I get a lot of different contracting agencies. But what I care about is the Army. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Army. And it just reduced my number down a lot more. And then the next thing is I'm looking right here, MIC Fort Moore. That's exactly who I want to get to. Mission Installation Contracting Command, I think is what MIC stands for, right? Fort Moore. So MIC has multiple contracting commands, if you will, or contract centers. And this is the one I want. And so for the fun of it, I'm going to click on it again. And now I've got 4,600 opportunities that are in here. And because I just did, I know I'm going really fast. You can come back and watch the replay. But I know I did this really fast. But what I did is I went from Fort Benning to then I said, we'll filter it even more by Army. And then I said, filter it by the contracting offices is Fort Moore. Now, with that, what I know is that I don't need these other, these other filters. Come on. So you see what I'm doing? I'm getting rid of the other filters. And so now my search criteria is only showing me contracting office name Fort Moore. And remember, Fort Moore is Benning. So contracting office, let me hit go. And so I have the last one, which is, I don't know how I got to 900. I mean, that's a huge amount, actually. When I really look at it and I see how many folks that they're going after, I could filter this down more in many different ways. But what I'm really looking for is one more filter. And I'm just going to search within results and change the date that it was signed to, let's say, the last year. So I already did it the last year there. I'm going to hit search. And so now I got 1,800. I can filter this down more and more. Like I'm looking for people who have only awarded related to my NAICS code or my keywords, right? In fact, let me just see if I can do one more filter. I'm just going to put in the word water because I said water management. So when I did that, I got 243 companies out of those 88,000 or whatever, right? So now here's a bunch of companies. I'm just going to zoom out for 1 second and I'm going to sort by action obligation, which is basically the size. And the reason I did all that, as I filtered myself down in FPDS, I'm trying to find people who are related to me. And so if I click here on view, I'm able to see in the top right-hand side, acquisition personnel. I don't currently know Joreen or Floor, what their actual job is, whether they're a contract specialist, a contract officer, or just administrator. But I think actually now there's rules in FPDS that are making the contracting officer have to put this data in. I know in SAM there is now, but it doesn't matter. It takes me 2 seconds to take these people's names that I have an email for. So this person here, Joreen, I'm assuming is a government or a military member, and then Floor is a civilian. But if you strip off the W9SG thing and you put it in Google, you can probably find out what their title is. But in a matter of minutes, I can build a list of 100 contracting related people that are out there, and I start reaching out until I find people, I get traction. So when you talk about the overall question, how can I break into, well, not literally, but how can I break into Fort Benning, Fort Monroe? I just built a list of 100 names in 10, 15 minutes. For you, let's say it takes a couple of hours, but if you're really trying to build up millions of dollars of business, you taking the time to do this research will enable you to begin to find the right people. One of the last things, and I'm not going to show you how to do it, but you can just keep in mind, somewhere down here, and I already lost track of where it's at, but somewhere on here, you can figure it out. It has place of performance, right? And so you want to filter this down one more time to make sure that the place of performance is Fort Benning, Fort Moore, so that now you're finding these contracting officers who are perhaps focused on that area. Okay, so let me show you. The last one is Fort Benning, Georgia, and I got like 5 minutes left. And this is thirsty business. This one here is going to be the complete maze one. Actually, what I showed you in FPDS, that's less of a maze because it really can be a process. You get your filters down. You saw some of those things I was doing. I was using DODAC numbers or contract office numbers, et cetera. Those type of numbers, if you take the time to learn about them, will help you get to data fast. Okay, so I'm in here and I'm trying to figure out how can I get into Fort Moore? In particular, I'm trying to get to somebody that I can talk to about water management. They've got a lot of stormwater on Fort Benning. How are they interacting with the civilian communities around them? That's the question and the dialogue I want to begin to have. I don't know the end state of where those meetings will happen, but I know that I want to talk to somebody, and I got a general idea that it's somebody responsible for like facility management or, that type of thing. And we'll come back to that in a second. So if I come into Wikipedia, because I'm just doing exactly what I would do if it was brand new start. I have a lot of experience, and so I might drive straight to Army sites, but you don't. So starting at Google and going to Wikipedia is not a bad thing. It's a place to get started. And so really, let me zoom in for a second. Really, for me, if I come in here, what I'm trying to find is right here. Perfect. Well, so it brought up an official site, but it brought up perfect. So it's army.mil. I'm off of Wikipedia and I'm onto the races, right? So now I'm on an Army site, and it's the Army Fort Moore. Remember, I only got a few minutes of training you. And so I'm not going to train you every single detail, but what I am trying to teach you is this process of understanding how you can navigate into a place. So I don't know anything about Fort Benning. And my boss said, go get us in there. Go talk to somebody about water. I'm like, all right, boss. And so I'm coming in and I see Fort Moore's here, which is perfect. I noticed that we've got Facebook twice because it must be really good. But I would be looking in there and figuring it out. One thing that I know that maybe you don't know is I know that Fort Moore, which used to be called Fort Benning, is a garrison, right? So it's an installation base. There are two types of people who are on or run or in charge in a military base. There are the people who go off and leave, right, to go fight the war, let's say. And they're the people who make sure that base is always running. And that's called a garrison command for the most part. And because I'm talking about water related to Fort Benning itself, Fort Moore itself, I don't care about the, heading off to combat. I care about this. And so I know that I'm looking for garrison command type people. The reason I say that is right when I clicked on this, I could see here is Facebook, and I don't go in there, so I don't know what it's showing, but I can see Army Garrison. I can use this to begin to explore some of the things they're saying. Who's out there? Well, here's one that says armymill.garrison. See how I just went from Wikipedia to the Army website up there to Facebook. Now I'm going back to an Army another site here. So now I just, I feel like I'm back in the same site, but I'm not. You notice how it's got different logos? So I'm not in there. But what I am starting to see is who's on here. So here's some of the directorates. This stuff's handy for me because I'm looking at Garrison, and I'm just looking at these guys trying to figure it out. Here's Public Works, right? Let's just take that. Again, I don't know a lot about water. I'm using that as an example. But if I go in, now I went from Wikipedia to the Army website to Facebook, back to the Army site on a different one. This is for Garrison Command. And now I'm inside the Garrison Directorate of Public Works. By the way, I didn't do any of this beforehand. And so I'm just showing you this stuff and how it can kind of happen. If I scroll down, I can see the goals, etc. But my eyes already went over here to an org chart and master planning. And I think I'm going to wrap up with that. So here's an org chart. And I'm able to come in here and see how they do this. And so operations and maintenance, that seems like a good one for me because, their job is to keep the garrison up and running. Environmental, I want to talk about water management, right? That's my example today. I want to talk about water management, and that's environmental runoff and all that stuff. Maybe these people will care, right? If I can get in and have a conversation with them and say, hey, I'm just trying to do a discovery call. And if I come up here to, this is even better, right? If I come up to the Directorate of Public Works, now I'm getting people's phone numbers. I don't know who they are. And I could take the time, by the way, to go to Google and say, show me who the master or planning is, division chief or whatever. But here's phone numbers, etc. This document, I can click on it, read a lot more. So as I'm coming down, here's just a bunch of numbers that allow me to do blind calls. If you're trying to get into a military base, and let me come back here really quick, turn that off. If you're trying to get into a military base and it's brand new, or if you're trying to get into Department of Education, same thing. You have to go through this discovery. You have to do research, which is our first step in the 7-step process. But when you do that, you can get right in. I know Jay Madigan's in the chat. I can see him. He is somebody I've been talking to who gave me the idea for today's training. I'm like, oh, let me show you. And literally just in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I'm able to show him enough that he and I maybe can have another conversation and take what I just showed you about Monroe and go way deeper in. I can find people's names, etc. And so what I'm teaching you here is just the process for research. When you think about trying to get into the Army, obviously do your research, so you want to understand it and you want to know who to talk to. But by doing that, you'll also know more about them and you can show them that you care. You've taken your time to do research. Before we head off, it is 12:30. I want to end right on time, but don't forget, go register in the Army Contracting Command Supplier Portal. Make sure they can find you if they're looking for a company like yours. And if you're not sure what your visibility score is to federal buyers, check out GovConInABox.com, GovConInABox.com, and I'll show you your score plus specific steps you can take on your own to go fix it today. All right, have a good day. I will see you in the next training.